Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you will reflect and that you will leave inspired by our amazing rock star panel of panelists. I'm so excited to get to be moderating this panel. There is data soon to be released by LEGO that only 35% of U.S. teachers and 31% of administrators believe that our students are engaged in learning. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. How was school today? How many of you have asked that to your own students? Well, hopefully we'll get a little longer answer than we get to our own children when we ask that question. But how often is that question asked to administrators and teachers? And so that's one of the goals of our panel. And so we want to share with you here, the media at ISTE, the conversations that teachers and administrators are having about education today. So Alex, how was your school year this year?
Oh, thank you, Vicki. Good morning, everyone. It was a great school year. I think in particular, rebounding from arguably the toughest in the history of Denver Public Schools, and definitely the toughest and the testiest, if I can, year in my professional career, superintendency aside. As you mentioned, some of the highlights, and I have members from Team DPS here who are really removing barriers across the system. We pride ourselves in dismantling oppressive systems, and we keep that at the forefront, so it's our cornerstone. We're disruptive by design, and I'm leading that charge. So historic graduation rates, there's a lot of embargo data that we're not supposed to speak about, so there's some exciting news as well. I believe that we'll be at all-time highs when it comes to assessment. But like my dear friend and mentor that you'll hear from in a moment says, we can't assess our way into excellence. You mentioned a couple of other things that really, really have me excited on how we really try to eradicate the barriers outside of just the school day. And I'll get into that hopefully a little bit later. So transforming lives, responding to new students and new families that we've welcomed. Per capita, Denver, where we are now, has received the most new-to-country students and families. And we've been incredibly responsive, but also there's some incredible stories to tell there as well.
Yes, remarkable stories about student engagement. We have Dr. Karen Chesser.
In the Durango School District, our entire mission is focused on making sure that every student finds and can live out their ikigai. So ikigai is a Japanese term. That is that perfect career that melds what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and also what you can make a living at. That is our goal. And we feel like this year we were well on our way to that. We had to get some foundational, I started there in also the summer of 2021, and we had to get some foundational work set. So we had new curricula for reading and math, new MTSS structures, and making sure that we were meeting our students where they were. And we were in our third year of a Portrait of Graduate this year. So a lot of artifact curation and capstone presentations, project-based learning, maker spaces, all the cool things that we know really engage kids. We were able to increase our scores substantially up to, we're in the top 20% in the state now from the bottom 30%. And our niche.com ratings went up 75 places. So we're really excited about the work. And we have amazing teachers. Haven't lost any principals or assistant principals in our 12 schools yet. So we think people are really onto the mission, and we're excited about that.
And of course, that is actually a huge achievement in a day and time where it's a challenge. Retention is a challenge for many schools in terms of principals and excellent teachers. So now we have Superintendent Alberto M. Carvalho. So how was your school year this year?
Good morning. My school year was pretty much the way of the year period, with a lot of ups, but also a lot of downs. I mean, we're all working in very interesting circumstances across the country, where politics trump common sense. There's a lot of indicting statements about the students that we serve. So I don't see how I could say it was a great year, because if you're an immigrant, you're going to hear headlines or read headlines in the paper that diminish who you are. If you're a person of color, there's an insult out there waiting to be pronounced. But on the positive side, so a lot of uncertainty at all political levels. We were in a conversation last night, and I use every opportunity I have to insult those who insult those I teach and protect. With that said, I think there is boundless opportunity, and we see it, whether it is in Durango, Denver, across the country, if you look for it or if you create that opportunity. So I don't look for opportunity, I actually like to create opportunity for the kids we serve. On that aspect, I think it was a pretty terrific year. Why? We are the largest independent district in the country, second largest in terms of student population, and unlike the rest of the country, we're fully staffed. We don't have teacher vacancies. Secondly, we were able to launch Transportation for All, Arts Equity for All, meaning every single student not only has access to arts and music programming, but has access to venues within the community, much like those who can afford the ticket and the transportation to get there, to the best shows of opera, ballet, Chicano music, hip hop, whatever you can think of. Students have that access guaranteed in a grade level, age level appropriate way. We develop a cohort of the 100 most fragile schools that report directly to me, and those schools are making significant gains, exceeding the gains of the state or the gains in schools within Los Angeles Unified. We also launched into aggressive labor negotiations, providing teachers up to 21% increase, and the lowest paid employees 30% increase, guaranteeing a minimum wage of $25 an hour. So we are equity driven, not only with our students, equity driven also with our workforce. In a process, I think we have done very well compared to the national norm, whether you're talking about chronic absenteeism. When I got to LA, it was an all-time high of 50%. It is now at 28%. Average daily attendance has been restored to pre-pandemic levels. Interim assessment data is outperforming, as I said, the state and the traditional schools in the community. And we look forward to this month, as we closed out the school year, a 1 month long summer of learning, of both academic acceleration as well as enrichment. And then obviously we're preparing for the 24-25 school year with a product lineup of new products initiatives that will stun the country. There's something for everyone in Los Angeles Unified. So in all, a pretty good year, wrapped around extremely poor and uncertain conditions driven by political ambitions of small-minded people.
Carlonda Miller, she's known as the magical teacher, and when you hear her speak, you will see why. So Carlonda, how was your year this year?
It was magical. I had a really great school year. I teach transitional kindergarten, and just watching my students grow was amazing. So if you didn't know, I'm the grade in between preschool and kindergarten. So watching them come in without knowing letters, names, what a pencil is, and leaving me performing at the end of kindergarten, beginning of first grade is just amazing. And that's every single student in my classroom. And just all the magical experiences that we had. We do different transformations in my classroom where my kids don't know what they're going to do every day. And so I just think, I can't pick one thing that would say what was the most amazing thing, but the whole school year was just magical. And just helping my students unlock the magic that's inside of them, because each and every student that's in my classroom has something unique about them. And I just love seeing it come out.
Dr. Jenny Nash serves as Head of Education Impact US for Lego Education. Now, Jenny, you work with teachers all over. So how was your school year?
My school year was fabulous, and I think it's because we have the opportunity to come work with these amazing school districts and help support these issues that they're dealing with and address them and find those great support systems. So my team's very uniquely positioned to go in and provide those supports to implement very playful, hands-on experiences, bringing that project-based learning piece in, thinking about inquiry-based learning and what's appropriate for all the grade levels and ages. And in addition to helping design that type of learning, we're working with the teachers. We're providing the professional development. We're making sure that it's more than just training on our product. It's really about helping those teachers be confident and bring that into their school system. I'm very proud that we trained almost 10,000 teachers in the last school year and really worked with them over that entire school year. Not just a one and done, good luck, right? It's really about helping them transform the way that they teach, and that helps transform schools. And I think some of what you heard is what we really want to strive to achieve at the end of the day.
Excellent. So we're going to spend about the next 20 minutes talking about student engagement. And again, I want to go back to that statistic of 35% of U.S. teachers and 31% of administrators describe their school's students as actually being engaged. That's pretty alarming. But how do you define engagement, Jenny?
I love actually to get to talk about engagement and defining it, because I think we often go immediately to it's active participation by our students in their learning, right? And that's so simple. It's really about that active participation. But then when we walk into classrooms, what does that look like? Students are talking collaboratively about the learning that's happening. They're working with, they're hands-on, maybe working through a project. They're trying to solve a problem, right? So that's something that they're really working through. But I go back to that statistic that you said, and does that truly mean that they're engaged with the learning? They're actively doing something, they're actively engaged in something, but we could be talking about Saturday night as much as we could be talking about the learning. We could be actively working on something, but it's not actually working towards the end goal that we want our students to have. And so it's really about thinking, what is it we want our students to learn? And what knowledge and skills do we want them to walk away with, and how do we design that learning? And I think that data that you're referring to really showed that over 50% of the teachers were saying, hey, when my kids aren't engaged, they're actually not remembering the material that we're talking about, right? That's when the behavior problems start. That's when we really start to see things break down. So I really stop and say it's not just about that active participation. It's about making sure students are curious about what they're learning. How do we bring their interests into what they're doing? How do we meet them where they are? I think you all gave some really great examples of not all students enter the classroom with the same interests or the same level of background knowledge, and how do we meet them where they are, spark that curiosity, help them discover, help them all grow in their learning. And I think that's when we really get really magical engagement. I think that's when engagement really starts to take off.
As well as adjusting our teacher evaluation system. So I've been teaching 22 years. And in some of those first years, I would have to ask my principal when he was coming so that I could lecture instead of doing project-based learning. Because my evaluation system, they didn't know how to comprehend project-based learning, and we know that's even more engaging.
I had my principal one time say, I'll come back when you're actually teaching.
So us teachers, this is the real world for us teachers. I believe that has changed significantly in the last few years. So let's transition. Alberta, you're ready for the World 2022-2026 strategic plan for the LAUSD has its third pillar as engagement and collaboration. So what worked this school year in increasing engagement for your students? Because it's astounding. You had 34,000 homes visited in your district this year. I mean, that's incredible.
It is, until it becomes the reality, right? And it's believable. So we, as I said earlier, we started out the year at a deficit as far as attendance was concerned, and certainly at a deficit when it came to honest student engagement, which transcends beyond just being present, right? I like the way you described student engagement. It is active, it is participatory. It is also having the student at the center of the educational ecosystem where he contributes to it, much like she absorbs from it. And the teacher is not the only entity that dispenses knowledge. So there's this organic, symbiotic transaction of information, of excitement, of joy. That's true student engagement. And when that happens, it is visible, it is palpable, it is noticeable, and it is irreplaceable. And fortunately, that is not necessarily the norm in classrooms across America, where we are, too often tied to Carnegie units, to bell-to-bell instruction with mandated seat time in uncomfortable classrooms are either too hot, too cold, with blah, blah, paint on the wall, that do not stimulate that type of environment where we expect students to thrive. So that's why we've made significant investments, to the tune of $500 million in creating outdoor classroom spaces, in creating opportunities for students to learn in non-traditional spaces, abolishing bell-to-bell mandated time for learning, really attempting to create environments where fun, joy, and learning can simultaneously coexist. But going beyond that as well. It's also sensitizing the workforce to this new approach, this new way of teaching. Otherwise, as it's been said, we'll always be looking for the one thing that does not work, but by which we are evaluated. And there's a big disconnect there. Secondly, it's a matter of really making this work. You know, you cannot teach the mind whose heart you don't first touch. And far too often, we go right into teaching algebra without asking, is that child ready to learn algebra? Or what are the gaps that will prevent that child from learning algebra? And being able to make those meaningful human connections prior to the true learning process begins is critically important. Lastly, going back to the issue that you mentioned, you know, connecting with kids means connecting with our families as well, with the community. And we do have robust technological tools that nudge, that call, that remind, that text students and parents, but that's insufficient. For that family or child who lives in absolute poverty, dealing with the foster care system, or experiencing homelessness, as is the case to close to 20,000 kids in LA, the nudge, the text, the phone call is going to get you nothing. In those cases, you actually need to meet eye to eye. You need to go out and knock on doors. That's why we launched iAttend. It's now iAttend 2.0, where myself included, board members, everybody's got to work, my senior staff, everybody. Once a month, 4,000 people in the community knocking on doors, going through the lists of the chronically absent kids, and making meaningful connections as a team. I go with an attendance counselor, with a psychiatric social worker, part of a team to address, first to understand the root cause of the disengagement, and then bring immediate resources at the point of contact, as opposed to, hey, why don't you call this number or come to the school and then we'll help you. No, the help, the assistance is done right there. You're right, in excess of 34,000 doors knocked on this year alone. And I believe that is very much the reason as to why average daily attendance has increased back to 92% from a measly 80% a year ago. That's why we decreased the chronic absenteeism. And that's why I think that our achievement is up, particularly driven by the kids who are at the bottom.
I always say you have to relate to educate, and that teaching is an art. Teaching is so challenging, but also leadership is an art. And it does require, leadership from the top, leadership by example. I think it's great that you knock on doors and you go where the kids are, because that's the kind of leadership that we need. Karen is also a leader. All of these are leaders. 3 years ago, the Durango School District was known for low graduation rates. And your Native American graduation rates were 60%. Now your graduation rates for that same set of students is 100%. I think that we all are very excited for you and your leadership there. You have obviously engaged students in learning, and what did your team do to engage those students? And you're a very rural district, so we have a lot of contrast here.
Yeah, so I can start with that just to kind of give you a context of where we are. Durango is in the Four Corners region, we border New Mexico. We are 1,200 square miles in my district, very rural. We don't have a Target. It's hard to get people to come to the hospital, the physicians, because their spouses say there's no Target. So it just gives you an idea about how rural. We're about 6.5 hours from here. So, our closest cities are 4 hours. Takes mountain passes. You have to go to get there. So in the winter, it's even more difficult. We are also a mountain resort town. So it's a beautiful place to live, to play, and that also brings tourists, and that also brings really high costs for housing for our staff. So we have all the pros and cons of being a rural district. So one of the things that we have worked really hard on is to engage all of our students and engage all of our families and be a very welcoming district. So this gets to this point of how have we welcomed and made a great place for all of our students, including our Native American students. We represent 32 tribes in the Durango School District. Many people are moving there, or they're even coming from Shiprock 2 and 3 hours away on the Navajo Reservation and spending the week in apartments with many, many students just to go to our school district. So I think we've done a lot of work to make people feel heard, feel welcomed. We have our Inclusive Excellence Guiding Coalition, which is our group of about 60 community members and staff who have been meeting every month for the last 3.5 years on our diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging plan, even when it's not popular to do so and there's a lot of pushback. And a big part of that work is to help our families and our kids feel more welcomed and feel that they belong. So tons of events. We have family liaisons. I do a Spanish-speaking, superintendent Spanish-speaking parent advisory council, which is really any families who want to come and speak in their language and I get translated for. So we've been trying to do so many things to really celebrate and help our kids feel like they belong. So I think that's sort of the foundation that has led to this being a place where kids want to come to school. But you can't, if kids aren't feeling successful, if they don't have hope for the future, if they don't see that plan for an ikigai, they're not going to want to stay in school. And so we've worked hard with our intervention systems to make sure we're giving students exactly what they need if there is a learning gap. Engaging curriculum. We've been working especially in math at the high school level, which our SAT scores for our Native American students went up 69 points in 1 year, which is unheard of. So those intervention systems, that sense of belonging, but then also, especially in a rural district where you don't have access to many opportunities, we're creating those opportunities in-house. So we have a Soil Labs, Sustainable Outdoor Inspiration Lab, that we've been getting private funding for, that we do field trips there. So kids who may not have had that access before now have that access. We've put maker spaces in all of our schools. We've got funding for that. Lots of Lego Ed products, spike robots, so that our students, no matter what your background is, no matter what access you didn't have before, now you have access to STEM tools that get you excited. So we're seeing that. And then also, one thing you may have heard lately, we're calling the alpha generation the honey badger generation. I don't know if you've heard that before, but there was this great viral video in 2010. My kids they were like 10 at the time, that talked about these kids, these honey badgers, which the alpha generation is like, especially being around technology their entire lives. They are determined, they are confident, and they want to make a huge impact. And so our goal is to help every one of our students, no matter what barriers you may have faced in the past, be able to make that impact. So focusing on project-based learning, we're focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals, making sure that kids understand and have the tools to make an impact in their community. And I think it's through that three-pronged approach, which is making sure we have interventions and curricula that get you to proficiency and beyond, no matter the content. It's making sure we have that foundation where you feel loved and you belong, tons of extracurriculars, field trips, opportunities, access, and then making sure that you have those strategies to be able to make a real impact and be engaged for that future ikigai.
Excellent. So Alex, in your role in Denver Public Schools, you have the district's highest ever graduation rate. You've done an incredible job of engaging families with your community hubs. So what are community hubs and how have they worked to engage students and families?
Yes, so community hubs, not novel in terms of an initiative. I believe very nuanced and different how we do it here in Denver. Let me first start by saying I have absolute faith in our education system. I haven't lost it. It can be incredibly frustrating at times. You have exemplars of those who've made it in spite of, if you will. Superintendent Cavallo mentioned in terms of poverty. I see the research in me that poverty, unfortunately, still remains the main predictor for student success and even for our young scholars to become productive members of our local or global society. We're trying to disrupt that, but that's the reality. We do an incredible job, and we can get into this healthy competition, Durango versus LAUSD versus us, and we'll continue doing this. Healthy competition, outpacing each other because we know what to do, bell to bell. We know what to do beginning of the school day, end of the school day, beginning of the calendar year, end of the academic year. And that's always going to be, I call it a rat race. What we have to, I believe, is disrupt what happens outside of school, beyond extended learning. And we have an incredible team who does everything that we can do in between vacation breaks, summer. But what happens at home, we seldom have influence over. And the reality is our students who are not living in poverty have access. They have resources, whether it's just simply having a learning experience or reading at home, some have the resources to, let's go to this camp, right? I know that was so foreign, not only for me, for everyone in my neighborhood, that it was just not a level playing field. I realized the aha moment on how behind we were, right? So I was trying to address that, right? Instead of just eradicating what exists in our system, how can we level the playing field? And Community Hubs was my attempt to do so. So we've heard of food banks. So just think of food banks on steroids. So we have a good with the letter R at the end, and you can envision a bodega instead of just here, get some cans. And most importantly, the learning experience that comes along with it. Student and parent or family member come in and say, okay, we will love to have some pasta. Well, here are the ingredients, learning experience. Here are the instructions. How are you all going to engage in this evening? Something so simple transforms what could happen at home. I mentioned reading. I have the absolute pleasure of doing that for my youngsters. I didn't have that again. It was not part of our fabric because my mom was in survival mode. Dad was mostly never around, right? So it's not that we're pointing the finger, it's just the reality of folks who have to make life decisions. But before they leave with their pasta and their sauce and their cheese and their ingredients and talking points for the evening, hey, by the way, here's a token, here's a book, a vending machine, all the languages that you can imagine. There's also something you can engage in, and now we're starting to build home libraries, right? I also know that our students, just like our staff, if they don't feel safe, secure, and valued, we won't do what I call, and my team here knows of this, great curriculum leads to instruction, great teaching leads to learning, the meat and potatoes of what we do as educators. That's not a theory, that's fact. But we have to make sure that we have the elements present. So just like our educators who may feel insecure, they're not going to deliver on that promise, teaching to learning. Even more so when it comes to our students. So of course we have everything that you need to make sure that they feel supported from just food insecurity, also clothing, and even assistance when it comes to just life, right? So I say from FAFSA, although that's proven to be a challenge, not because of us, federal government, if you're listening, to taxes, right? A one-stop shop of making sure that we can have a level playing field outside of the school day. So that's what the vision was. It's proven to be not only invaluable, even more so with the 4,000 new-to-country students that we welcomed this year. When I say leveling the playing field, let me put it in perspective. And I know that we all have stories to tell. I was almost homeless as a high schooler. Someone to the left of me was, right? So education saved a lot of our folks. But instead of just pointing at those who made it through the rubbish, if you will, why can't we take an approach to just make it very difficult for someone to fall through the cracks, spinning the narrative? So I carry a 4-page letter written by someone, one of our young scholars who's heading into the 3rd grade, beautifully written in Spanish, her journey, 4-page letter that counts of 9-month walk. If you can imagine a trek from Venezuela through Central America, through Mexico, Southwest, to land in Denver. And it's so heart-wrenching that I haven't had the courage to read it to my daughter, who's learning Spanish in Denver Public Schools. When you see death, when you see rape, leveling the playing field becomes so much important as opposed to, where the proficiency level is, right? And that parent also who made that sacrifice. So that's what we've been able to do with the community hubs, trying to level the playing field for those who are really trying to reestablish life and everything that comes along with the journey of trying to do better for their family. So I believe that once we do that, then we'll see those gaps that have been persistent in our systems start to shrink.
I think we can all see the way forward. You know, we're at a technology conference and so many people, oh, AI is the future. It's human intelligence. It's human connections. That's the only way forward. AI is a tool, but humans rule, right? So we have got to connect to one another, and that's where it starts, those human relationships, and that's the same in the classroom. And Carlonda, your attendance rate was so incredibly high, and you are known as the magical teacher. What is your secret to engage students? And I hope you'll just tell just a few of your magical stories, because it's just so exciting.
Well, first I'll start off with what magic means to me. So magic is motivation, academic accountability, goal-driven, inquisitive thinking, and content engaging. You need all of those things in your classroom to help unlock the magic inside of your students. And when I say motivation, it's intrinsic. I don't have a treasure box. I don't give out prizes. I do things, and my students do the things that they're supposed to do because they want to succeed in life. So we have conversations at 4 on why you need to do the things that you're doing. You're not gonna do this because you want a piece of candy. You're gonna do this because you wanna learn this information so that you can get ready for kindergarten. And for academic accountability, my students run the room. It runs like an oil machine because they know everyone has their role. We're learning through play. I just miss them so much, but I had to give them on. They have to go to the next grade. But they're learning how to have academic conversations with a partner, and they're able to talk about the text that we're reading at 4 years old. Goals, they're 4 and they have goals. So my first transformation I'll tell you about is when we come back to school halfway through the year, I do a balloon drop at noon in my classroom. And it's to symbolize the new beginning of the year. And then we talk about goals. They write an academic goal. When I say write, they're drawing. But hey, go with me. So they're drawing, and some of them can write. Everyone has their own, ability. And they're writing goals for, I want to learn how to make my bed, or I want to tie my shoe, or some of them were very ambitious. I want to learn how to read a whole book, And then inquisitive thinking is just being very inquisitive. And that's what learning through play is all about. And just watching them come up with the things they do and the roles that they play. And when you sit back and you watch children play, you're not just watching play, you're watching them learn social emotional skills, they're learning critical thinking skills, they're learning academic skills. And so it's interesting to see how we have dolls. And I noticed that they would take the dolls and they're in the sensory table. And some teachers would freak out about the stuff being moved around the room. And I asked, what is this about? And they was like, well, the baby's taking a bath. So they created a whole bathtub for it was very interesting. And then content engaging. So I like to do a lot of content engaging activities where they never know when it's going to come in. So for the 50th day of school, I threw them a tea party. So the 50th day of TK. And they came in, we were very fancy dressed, and all of our activities were tea themed. So they're counting teacups, or they're sorting teacups, or our story was about teacups. I do a glow day, the whole classroom is glowing in the dark. And everything in our sensory table is going in the dark. In that, you may see, they're just playing, but once again, they are learning their fine motor skills, they're identifying letters, numbers, and then we had a pinball machine, and that's working on their gross and fine motor skills. Like, everything that I do is academic based, and the kids just don't know. They think they're coming in, they're playing, but my principal is able to let me do the things that I do because I can give her the data that she needs. And I know the standards for each and everything that's in my room. Everything is purposely done and planned for. And what else? I did a tiki room. So if you're a Disney fan, I transformed my classroom into the tiki room, and I connected to the story Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. And so I had a Chicka Chicka Boom Boom tree, and then the sensory table was all Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. We read the text. They were able to tell me what's going on in the story. It was just, I want to have fun. So I go to school to have fun. And so if I'm having fun, the kids are gonna have fun. I can't wait to get to work the next day. So I know my students can't wait to get to school. And I think that's what this is all about, is finding the time to create magical experiences, not only for the kids, but for yourself as well.
So I'm loving seeing the smiles on our superintendents and our face. Do y'all see that? Do you see their, why are your faces lighting up when she's talking? Who wants to say
Well, you want that for every child, right? And I remember being an elementary teacher, an elementary principal, and there are many days I'd like to be an elementary teacher again, but I think just you want that for every child, to have that experience about school, so thank you.
And for every teacher.
Yeah, and to have the freedom, because your principal, I can do a lot in my classroom because of the freedom. I mean, I taught AP Computer Science Principles, but I taught it game-based, and I had complete freedom to do that. So how do we unleash? I mean, I know y'all have great examples of incredible teachers. Do you have any examples you want to share? I know we're kind of going off script, but this is about conversation, right, on engagement. Do you have any great examples that, like Carlana's example, that you can think of, that you'd like to share, that you've seen magical teaching? And I just find it interesting, the facial expressions that I'm seeing here.
Yeah, if I can. I think the passion and when you reference that you miss them so deeply, just again, just reassures what I mentioned earlier, that we already know what works, right? We as superintendents and those who are lawmakers and policymakers need to ensure that we don't lose that. And in certain cases after the pandemic, I felt that in certain cases we had to reignite that passion because it was so devastating to the system. So that was more of a reassurance and delight to hear. But I also love when innovation is allowed in the classroom, right? So when you empower students as well.
And you've been quoted as saying that you are ruthless in the pursuit of equity. I mean, isn't this what you want for every child? Absolutely. What does it mean to be ruthless in the pursuit of equity?
So that's a borrowed quote, if you will. Great Ken Williams. Ruthless Equity is actually a book that we as a system are following in a book study. And he happens to be a great researcher, former practitioner, school leader, and a New Yorker. So we have a lot in common. And the quote is actually, we have to be ruthless in your pursuit of equity. That's part one. Part two is even more powerful, and this is where it gets you in the front page of the news and not in the best way. So ruthless in the pursuit of equity, but also be ruthless in eradicating those and removing those obstacles and those factors that prevent you from doing that part one, right? So when we have resistance, then it's my duty to make sure I remove that. Now, whether it's a collective issue, whether it's a political issue, whether it's a Board of Education policy that needs to be shifted, the courage to take that on, to me, is the biggest challenge. And I've been able to do that several times in my tenure here in Denver, which is incredibly unpleasant to do, because you're really distorting folks, not reality, I would say even paradise, not realizing that the paradise that exists, the status quo, is resulting in, no pardon the pun, the results that we have. So if that doesn't bother you, then we have a problem, right? So whenever I see this, that is at the grass roots as opposed to the grass top, it's encouraging, because what I would like to do is replicate that, and now I have a lab site to do so. And I know that those students in that environment are going to do great things, but even at the most basic, they enjoy their experience, so they're looking forward to the next day, right? When we're rebounding from students who are even struggling on getting back into the swing of things.
Now, I have to ask about the EdAI platform for student engagement, Alberto, because we're not going to say that AI is the answer, but I will say I use AI chatbot tutors in my classroom. I've programmed custom GPTs for all types of tasks, and they're really great at some things. Tell us about your launch and what you've seen, and are you excited? Do you think that will help engage students even more?
It's not that I think I know. I think we've proven the point already, but I want to touch on the issue you were just discussing. You know, all I was thinking about as you were speaking is, you know, she works in Fresno, I'm in LA. I kept thinking, what would it take for you to come to LA? because, yeah, because, to some people, to the untrained ear, it seemed like, this classroom is a lot of fun. It is, but it starts with a highly skilled teacher who actually has content mastery at the highest level. A teacher that creates a fun environment devoid of content mastery will not teach kids. Fun alone will not teach kids. The trick here is to make the teaching at a high level of rigor in a way that appeals to kids. And when that happens, it's magic, right? And great teachers do that all the time. We have them in our systems, and we see it from the moment you walk in. You see the space, the decoration, you feel the atmosphere. You can notice a differentiated instruction, different stations, right? And that constant rotation where kids actually own the space and travel the space with joy, with happiness, with eagerness. They're owning their own educational journey. And that always works. It works at the elementary level, it works at the high school level. In middle school, nothing works. No, I'm kidding. In middle school is a little tougher because of all the reasons we know. But when you create those environments that begin always with an individual like her who knows how to go from the impossible to the inevitable because she plays these three domains: belief, skill, and will. You believe in your kids, you have your kids believe in themselves, you have a high level skill for teaching, pedagogical skill, but also social emotional connectors that you see in your classroom. And then that will, there's nothing that can be impossible, I can do anything. And therefore your kids actually mimic the behavior they see from the adult in liberating them into their own learning. So kudos to you and thank you for being a remarkable teacher. That is not a guarantee in every classroom across America. So until such time as that becomes a guarantee, we need solutions, short-term solutions, that don't necessarily replace the less than adequate work that colleges and universities do in terms of preparing and forming teachers. Highly inadequate. They're not doing a good job. A lot of it falls on K-12 leaders, but in reality, the inadequacy of training is something we need to address, particularly in rural areas, particularly in urban areas. Colleges and universities do a great job of preparing teachers that will teach in suburban settings where average income is middle or high. For urban settings, most teachers leave colleges and universities without the skill set to survive. Therefore, they bail out after 5 years or less. We need to do a lot better job. Until such time, we do need tools that complement, supplement, and support the needs of students. And artificial intelligence is one of those environmental tools. It is not a replacement for anything. It's not going to replace teachers, counselors, but it certainly is an additive that is very powerful. We went to market a little over a year ago to find a solution that would be homegrown in partnership with a private sector entity that would bring in an engine. That's all we wanted. We wanted the AI engine with its own code, with some degree of proof of concept in terms of engagement. And there are a lot of companies out there that have produced results using AI. You put in all the student information data, the contact information for the student, the parent, a multi-year profile of the student as far as attendance records are concerned. And these systems use AI because they detect a micro trend that then is matched up against 2 to 3 years. And then they generate a number of nudges, reminders, knock on door, digital, right, calls, emails to the parent and the student. And that produces result. The idea was, can we take that construct, that type of environmental architecture, but then blow it up into something much bigger? And that's how ED came about. ED is an IAP. It's an individualized acceleration academic plan for every student. In a system of 540,000 students, ED transforms the system of 540,000 students into 540,000 schools of one through absolute personalization and individualization. Let me paint it for you very quickly. We are data rich. Every system in America is data rich. Usually, data rich, use poor. Meaning we do not necessarily leverage the vast majority of data we have on students. We assess them, but in the state of California, for example, we assess kids and the results don't come in until the following year after the school year has begun. So to what end are we assessing kids? For me, the only assessment that makes a difference is assessment that allows recalibration, real-time recalibration, informs professional development, informs the conversations we need to have with private sector entities about what worked and what didn't, developing efficacy coefficients, right, that allow for the contract negotiation, but ultimately allow us to improve our own practice with students. So I'm so tired of waiting a year to get things that help me help improve students' lives that we said, we need to change that. So we have interim assessment data through powerful entities. We have attendance data. We have social emotional data. We have parent information data, socioeconomic data. We have so much data. Why not use that data to the power of AI and have real-time refresh, meaning a recalibration that happens automatically all the time, using all that data to improve the educational environment for the student, whether it's attendance, reading, math, graduation on time, everything. What does it look like? Just think about this entity that speaks 100 languages. You can speak to it, type to it. It will greet you, will wake you up in the morning. It knows exactly your schedule. If you are transported, it will wake you up, and after you brush your teeth, it's telling you what the first ice break and first period is going to be. It's telling you what the breakfast, lunch, and the snack will be. Will remind you of your athletic activities. It will tell you, if you are transported, that your bus is 2 minutes away because it is connected to the GPS technology in the buses. It will remind your parent also of what's happening. If you are absent 2 days, it may be nothing, but it's juxtaposing that here and now measure against 2 years worth of attendance, and that's how it started. And it knows that after 2 days of back-to-back absences that you are probably on your way towards chronic absenteeism, and automatically sends a nudge to the parent, sends a nudge to the attendance counselor to call the parent to intervene before it gets worse. It does also, and this is the last thing I will say because it is powerful, is we were able to, through very powerful data use agreements, solve something that the private sector has been trying to solve and has spent hundreds of millions of dollars, including in Bloom a number of years back, to arrive at an interoperability set of agreements on data usage, bringing in usually competitors. So think of, let's say Lego, Discovery Education, Curriculum Associates, IXL, Age of Learning. I just put a lot of players and they all compete against one another. We force them to all play in the same sandbox using the same data within our protection, our umbrella, guaranteeing data privacy, right? Force them all to play within the same sandbox with one single sign-on, which the student is totally oblivious to whose domain she's in at this point. You sign on, Ed greets you. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Ed, Eduardo, Edwina. As I said, gender neutral, you pick a voice, you pick the profile, you'll speak to you, it'll meet you where you are all the time, and your parent. It adjusts to the reading level of the parent and the student, and then continues to improve it. So if based on the student profile, the student is performing 2 years below grade level, and for example, iReady will tell you that, right? It will automatically say, hey, you did well yesterday, click here. And automatically, he's now in an iReady session. But she doesn't know she's in iReady. She's in a fun, engaging ecosystem. And then after a while, because we know that too much of a good thing is not good, it will say, hey, how about a brain break? Because it learns the students, because it is generative AI based, it will take you to a little music break where it forces you to move and you get excited. Then it says, hey, that was great. You probably danced to it. How about clicking here? Because it knows where the student's performance in math is, and now it's going to take you to age of learning or illustrative math. And it's that ecosystem that is always improving, upgrading itself, always learning more about the student and the family that I believe is the big change maker.
Well, the great AI helps us be better humans. I mean, that's the AI that makes a difference. We don't need it to do things that, teaching is an art It's an art, and we need to support the art of teaching. But these are the things that save time, because who's doing the data now in most classrooms? It's the teachers. The teachers are not only planning lessons, they're learning how to do spreadsheets because they're compiling data. And when you do this, you free up the teachers to have more magic in their class.
That is an important point. 15 seconds. It is not about replacing the teacher. It is impossible. Education is a social interaction. Devoid of the social interaction, devoid that human contact, you're not going to be able to teach kids. You'll get kids to learn something and perform, but there's a lot more than just demonstrating proficiency in an exam. If we want compassionate human beings, you cannot just have them in front of a computer.
Jenny, teachers, let's finish up with teacher engagement, and then we'll be done. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. And I think we've already established that's where the magic happens, right? I think that we may have said it, but I think the research still shows that the number one influence on students really being able to grow and learn is the teachers. We can have great materials, we can have great curriculum. You've got to have that teacher that can bring that to life. And I think that we just constantly talk about how important it is. Our teachers are burnt out. They're doing a lot of things. We've already uncovered they're so responsible for so much, and that student at the end of the day, and so many students often in the classroom. And we're asking them to teach some things that they actually don't know how to do. I mean, we didn't learn this way when we were in school. Teachers didn't learn this way. They haven't been that learner to experience the engagement that we're talking about, the playful learning that we want to see, the joy that we want to bring into the classroom. So I think that professional development is so important, because we need to first let the teachers experience this type of learning. What does it feel like? What should it look like in the classroom? Let's get that experience first, and then how do we help them become that facilitator of that learning? How do we bring that project-based learning in? How do we support them in planning in that way? They've never planned in that way before. And I just think that's the piece that sometimes is missing, and great examples of how that's happening absolutely sitting here. But we just can't forget that educator in all of it, because they are the ones bringing it up. And I mean, the magic, as we were talking about, how do we show those examples to more teachers? How do we help them see that, yeah, we can do this, and here's the support system that'll be in place. And I challenge myself every day with LEGO Education. I challenge all the other providers out there. We need to provide that. We can't just show up and say, buy our great materials. Hey, we need to support you. We need to have those supports in place. We need to make sure the curriculum is there. The curriculum needs to be designed to be inquiry-based. It needs to set the teacher up for success. We need to show them what that looks like and prepare them to go teach it, and be there supporting them day after day after day to make sure that they're successful for it. And I think we made a great point just talking about having so many educators in one district, and the fact that they're not all there yet. So we have to differentiate that instruction for teachers too. It's not everybody shows up to the same training. They need different supports themselves.
Teacher training should look like we want it to look in the classroom. I'll never forget being lectured for 2 days on project-based learning.
And it needs to be purposeful. I think we used that term obviously earlier, but we need to make sure that we're purposeful in the way that we show them how to have fun and how to be hands-on and playful, because otherwise it's not hitting those standards we need to teach. It's not hitting that expectation. We won't see that growth.
Carlonda, do you have any last words for superintendents and principals who are like, I want somebody like you in my school?
Well, first, I'll say you can actually bring me to your school. I do professional developments, just throwing it out there. So I can come, yes, I can come visit and do some teaching to your teachers and your staff. But I think for teachers, you have to take care of yourself. You can't do anything without taking care of yourself. Make sure you're eating breakfast, you're getting your rest, and you have a life outside of school. My new hobby now is running. So I've ran 8 5Ks so far this year. That's my new thing. So make sure you have something that's pouring into you, so that when you go into the classroom, you can pour into your students. Have fun at school, because if you're not having fun, the kids aren't having fun. I can't say that enough. You need to enjoy what you're doing, and in order to do that, you need to figure out what type of instructor you are and what will bring you joy. For administrators, superintendents, I would say let your teachers show their magic. Trust that they know their standards and that they can create a magical experience. As long as they are backing it up, I can tell you every standard I'm hitting for every activity, and also give you the data of that I'm observing and taking in information. Because when kids are learning through play, Don't forget that learn part. Yes, they're playing, but if they're learning, that means I'm taking notes, or I'm taking pictures, or I'm playing and I'm listening to the conversations that they're having, because it's all a learned opportunity to gather that data, right, that we love so much. But you can't do it if you're put in a box. So let them out. And teachers prepare, because when you're out of that box, it's up to you. So for example, people always ask me, how do I prepare the magic? I'm already planned up till December for next year. Like, I'm already thinking of magical experiences and things that I'm going to do for next year, because I'm a futuristic person. So you can't live in the now. If you want to spread magic, you have to think ahead and start thinking about the things that you want to do in your classroom. And people say, how do you fund it? Ask people. People love giving us money. Ask people for your classroom, like, hey, I'm going to do this transformation. Can you give me this? Or whatever it is that you need. People love helping the next generation. So make sure that you ask for help. Let's review. Take care of yourself. Eat your breakfast, eat, prepare yourself, get your sleep, ask for help, plan, let us out of the box. The end.
Great advice. So on behalf of LEGO Education, thank all of you for coming to this important conversation on engagement, and I hope that all of you will bring the importance of engagement to your roles and all of the things we've learned about engaging every single student. We have to relate to educate. This is about the human connection. Yes, we have tools that can help us, but that hands-on, that play, that project-based learning, these are the things that I have found when people ask me, how can I deal with cheating and AI? Stop giving assignments that are the same assignments we've been giving for the last 30 years and start doing projects and playing. Thank you so much, and thanks for coming to ISTE, and thank you to our panelists.